Hi, and welcome to the Right to Remain Silent podcast. I'm Jim Weber, your host and guide through actual accounts of intriguing and fascinating true crime stories as told by the law enforcement professional that experienced the event. The Right to Remain Silent podcast makes no exaggeration of fact, doesn't glamorize details, or sensationalize reality. The format here is basic. Real stories from real cops. Lastly, please don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share. Doing this will help me continue to provide you, the listener, with captivating and relevant true crime stories. Now, let's listen in on today's episode. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the Right to Remain Silent True Crime Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Weber, and today's guest is Roy Padilla. Roy is a career law enforcement officer from the state of Texas and worked a large portion of his career as an undercover officer conducting a wide variety of investigations. Roy, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate you, and I look forward to our conversation.
Mr. Weber, thank you for the invite. I appreciate you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know listeners are going to thoroughly enjoy the conversations that we have today. But before we get going here, would it be all right if I read your bio so that listeners are familiar with you and your background and kind of where you're coming from as we discuss things today? Is that all right?
Of course, yes, sir.
All right. Roy's law enforcement career began in August of 1980 with the Donna, Texas Police Department. By 1981, he joined the Pharr, Texas Police Department, where he rose through the ranks and in 1992 was assigned as a Drug Enforcement Task Force investigator. In 2010, he became the Assistant Chief of Police, a role that he held until his retirement from the department in 2012. But his service didn't stop there. Later that year, he took on the role of police chief for the Donna Independent School District, protecting students and staff until his second retirement in 2017. Today, he continues to serve his community through his private investigations firm, Texas Strong Shield, and he also works as part of the NBA's San Antonio Spurs security team. Roy, again, thank you. And just based off your bio, I am confident we could talk for hours and hours today, but
Yes.
we're going to restrict it and we're just going to cover some undercover investigations. Does that sound good?
Yes, sir. I'm with you.
All right. All right. Well, hey, let me ask you this. Why is it that way back in 1980, you decided to pursue a career in law enforcement? What triggered that?
Well, it just started as a young kid growing up in a small town. Donna, Texas is a small town in the area of the Rio Grande Valley, which is right there in southern Texas by the Mexican border, really. I was always fascinated with the police cars and the police officers and the whole deal that they were there always to help people. Um, I had my early years of, as a teenager, 15, 16. I noticed that in the police force, I had a couple of friends that were older than me and working as police officers. I said, man, that's me. I can see myself doing that. So I remember clearly walking into straight up to the chief of police office in Donna, was chief back then. Chief, he's not with us anymore. Chief Fernando Castaneda, and I said, Chief, I want to be a police officer. I was 18 years old. I was shy of about 4 or 5 months of turning 19. Back then, Jen, the law in Texas was you could be a police officer at the age of 19.
Wow, that's young, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I was 18 years old, and the chief said, "Listen, Roy, when you turn 19, come back and see me, and we'll talk." And basically, I'm gonna tell you and the audience how exactly how it happened, which I never forget. I still remember it. It was yesterday. Um, the day I turned 19 in August, uh, on August the 5th, I turned 19. I waited a day to go see the chief,
Gotcha.
and I went there August the 6th, and I said, "Chief, you told me to come back when I was 19. I'm 19." And said, this is the way he told me. So, yeah, you really want to be a police officer? I said, yes, sir. I want to work here. Okay. I'll tell you what. He reached over to his desk on the right side drawer to his desk and pulled out badge number 114. And he tossed it to me. And he said, listen, buddy, I come in tonight at 11. Report to Sergeant Garcia. Just like that.
Wow.
I said, okay, Chief. So I got up and I shook his hand. Thank you. He said, by the way, buddy, do you have a gun? You say, yes, sir. I have a 38 special. So, okay. Good luck. Oh, by the way, go to the locker room and file some uniforms that fit you.
Wow.
Now, that's how I started my career. But what a lot of people don't know, a lot of people would know our age and the older generation. At 19 years old, I could be a police officer and carry a gun. But back then, during that time, 1980, a 19-year-old could not purchase ammunition. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not. I did not
Yeah.
realize that.
So I could carry a gun as a police officer, but I could not go to a local hardware store and purchase ammunition.
That's
So
amazing.
I had to borrow some ammo to put in my on my gun and on my duty holders, on my bullet holder. Um, the following weekend, after working 5 days, I told my dad, Dad, I'm gonna, we lived small town. The local hardware was about 3 blocks from my house. So I walked over to that. I'm gonna go buy some ammunition for my gun. I said, all right. So I walked over to the hardware store called Bell's Hardware Store. And gentleman there said, sir, I need a box of 38 Mission. So he went back there to the room and brought a box. And I'm starting to make out a check. I had a checkbook and make out a check and pay them uh, 750 for the box
Also,
of 30
$7.50 for a box of ammo.
cents. So he asked for my ID. I showed him my ID. So I'm sorry, sir, I can't sell you this. So why? Why? Because you're not 21. And I told him, sir, you don't understand. I'm a police officer here in Dalton. And he looked at me and said, listen, Mr. Padilla, I know who you are. Just go home, tell your dad to come buy the booze for you. So I walked home, back home, and I told Dad, they won't sell me the ammunition. You have to go. So Dad and I both walked over there, and he had to buy the ammunition. But I wrote the check.
That is an amazing story.
That's incredible. And I tell my kids and friends and family that story, I'll never forget it. Yeah, I could walk around with a gun loaded, but I just couldn't buy ammunition.
Man, that is just mind-blowing and just I can't even believe it. I'm kind of speechless on that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I was just working nights. And also the law back then, Jim, to be a police officer, you had to be 19, of course, but the law was that you could be a police officer without attending a police academy within a year. You could work as a police officer full time, but within 1 year of your appointment as a police officer, which mine was August of 1980, you mean within 1 year, you had 1 year to attend the police academy,
So you could work for essentially just under a year as an officer without attending
the
training.
police academy. Yes, sir. So I worked, basically, I worked from August to December, the whole year as a police officer. And in January of 81, I attended the police academy. And the academy back then, it was 7 to 8 weeks long. And now your police academy right now is at least from 8 months to a year.
Right,
So
right.
I attended the academy, police academy, and finished up in March of 81 and worked. We worked a couple of more months in Ghana. So I was making, Jim, biweekly in Ghana, I was making about 200 and maybe $50, $250 every 2 weeks as a police officer.
Unbelievable.
And I was happy. I was I was a police officer doing the job that I wanted to do.
Yeah, you didn't know any better, right? Like $250, they're paying me to do what I want.
Exactly. Exactly. So come May, come May, the city of Far Police Department needed to hire police officers because they had lost like 5 to 7 police officers overnight to the city of McAllen. And the city of Far was desperate to hire police officers. So a good friend of mine who's still living, Gilbert Carizales, was a police officer in Donna, and he had left to Far. And he came by to visit me in May on 1980. I'm sorry, 81. And he said, Roy, they need 7 police officers in Far, and they're paying $50 more every 2 weeks.
There's some incentive right there.
What did I do? I went over there, and the chief at that time in Far was Chief Patrick Gallagher, former Green Beret. Great guy. We were like best of friends the little time that we met, we known each other. And I walked in there to apply. I remember sitting down in the office with Lieutenant Carl Basan and Chief Gallagher, who I had met at the police academy, passing by. He passed by the office and Padilla, what are you doing here? So we got up and we hugged each other. Sir, I'm applying for a job. And the chief looked at the lieutenant, put this guy in a uniform right now, hire him right now. That's how I started working with the frontlines.
Just pausing right there, just pausing your story. It's incredible how times have changed and how things unfolded back during that time frame. That's amazing. That is so interesting to hear how your career started and then began progressing.
Right, right. And I enjoyed that time working with the police department in Florida. And I made that move because $50 every 2 weeks was a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
And so basically, throughout my years in FAR, because I was still 19 when I started in FAR, I was still 19 years old.
Okay.
So throughout my early career in FAR, basically I did street patrol, did crime prevention, helping create the neighborhood watch program. Uh, I was assigned to CID, Criminal Investigation Division. 3 years later, down the road, I spent a couple of years there in CID until I said I missed the streets, so I wanted to go back to the streets. Um, and then if you fast forward to 1992, actually 1990, the police department was implementing a program called Crime Stoppers. And basically, the chief back then, Anacleto Martinez, tasked me with that. He said, "Roy, I need you to start that program, Crime Stoppers, here." And I started. I started that program, uh, hit it hard. During that time that I was working with Crime Stoppers, in the summer of '92, a lot now keep in mind that our proximity to the Mexican border is what, 5 miles.
You beat me to the punch. I was gonna ask you that for the benefit of the listeners. I think it would be interesting and helpful for them when we're talking about FAR, Texas. We're talking about PHARR, Texas, and that's in the vicinity of McAllen, Texas. And I was gonna ask you again, you said it, but how far approximately from the Mexican border are you located and are you working?
In if you're in FAR, because it varies depending on the city where you're at, the Rio Grande Valley, but in FAR, you're approximately 2.5 miles from the Mexican border.
And that's I think that's gonna be instrumental in the things that you talk about as we progress through here because of that close proximity to the border, you're, I'm assuming, dealing with narcotics crossing the border and drug cartels, south of that border. So I think, that's an important piece of the puzzle as we're gonna talk about your career here. Does that sound accurate? Okay.
We're so close that there was so much going on back then. Now it's hard for someone to commit a crime and literally go back to Mexico and cross over. Where back then it was so easy. You commit a crime, any type of crime, and if you're from Mexico, you just cross over to Mexico.
Yeah, you just cross that and disappear.
Right, exactly. So uh, the summer of 1992, our Crime Stoppers program, I was answering the phone, the hotline, because I was committed to my job, sir. I was committed to, you know what? This is, I carried one of the first mobile phones that came out, which was a bag phone.
Yep.
I'm sure you remember that.
Yep, I sure do.
It had a battery pack and a zipper, little purse type. I would carry that phone and answer it if it rang. So I remember back in early summer, June of '92, back then the chief, chief of police in FAR was Leo Saldaña, who is not with us no more. He's left to the Lord. Uh, I remember him clearly telling me, "Roy, how many drug cases calls are you getting to drug talk?" I said, "Well, basically all my calls are drug related, sir." "Okay, you're gonna be a narcotic investigator."
Wow. Simple as that, huh?
That's it, just like that, because you're dealing with phone calls coming in, information about drugs. And what better is you be an investigator along with somebody else and you investigate. So overnight, that's the way it happened.
Man, they just kinda give you the boom, here you go.
Little blessing that hit it hard.
Alright.
Um, we worked many cases. I can't give you a number. There was just too many.
I would assume astronomical.
Yes, and cases that were assigned to the Drug Enforcement Administration, McAllen, Texas, and HSI, Homeland Security Investigation as well.
Sure.
During that time when I was first assigned to narcotics, I can tell you I spent 18 years doing undercover work as a narcotic investigator.
At that point, you had been doing undercover that long?
Since that point, yes.
Okay, okay, so
Yep,
you're well versed. You're well versed and well experienced in that then at this point.
right.
Okay.
And there was a lot to adjust to. Because keep in mind, Jim, that I'm not one person to cuss. I don't say bad words. I don't say it in front of my friends. I don't say it in front of my family. But I learned that during the undercover operation, I learned that I needed to cuss.
Yeah.
So I would cuss, and use different language according to how the bad guy wanted, what he wanted to hear, how I wanted to hear.
Right. You're adjusting. You're adjusting to your environment.
Exactly. Every narcotic investigation is different. So every target, when I say target, is the person you're going to deal with, the bad guy. He is going to be different than what he expects you to be like. But my job as undercover is to either sell him dope or buy it from him or transport it for him. In most cases, I was the transport.
Yeah, that's a great point. And let me just pause you real quick. Again, for the benefit of listeners, that close proximity to the border uh, would have been instrumental in what you just said in posing as a transporter, because a lot of these drug organizations or even cartels, you know much better than I do. But again, for the benefit of those that are listening, part of the overall process is getting drugs from point A to point B. And part of your undercover opportunities or responsibilities are posing as an individual that transports these products. So I just that was a great point, and again, I just kinda wanted to elaborate a little bit on that, what you mentioned there.
Yes, and you're right. That proximity to it, to the border, had a lot to do with it because the crossing of 18 wheelers. Uh, I know I didn't mention to you, Jim, but I'll mention it right now. My role, my typically as a narcotic investigator, undercover investigator, was my role was a truck driver. Basically, my role.
Sure.
So when a truck came across and customs flagged the truck or x-rayed the truck and found the drugs in there concealed, however, and placed the driver under arrest, well, the driver will eventually confess and say, hey, all I know is that I gotta call this phone number, ask for this guy in Chicago, for example, Atlanta, New York, and I gotta be there in 2 or 3 days. So at that point, the driver will be placed in custody and I will be jumping into that truck.
So
And
you would have then yep, you would assume the role of that individual to continue on to further that investigation. The overall goal here is to further the investigation, to see where those drugs are going and to try to determine who they actually came from. And again, you're more well versed in this than I am, so I would ask if I misstate something, please don't hesitate to correct me.
no, you're right. That was the role. And of course, if you think about it, I'm driving an 18 wheeler and there's always a partner with me. My partner, Ray Tobias, who just so happened that we're from the same town, Donna. You know, he's a couple of years younger than me, but we are considered brothers because whenever we worked, I trusted him and he trusted me. And we knew what we wanted to do during our operation without even talking.
And
Just
that's crucial.
you know.
Yeah, that's crucial for success of your investigation and for your overall safety, right? Yeah, okay.
And when we take control of a load of drugs to transport, like in most cases that we did, well, the driver, the original driver says it's, let's say, for example, the load needs to be in Chicago in 2.5 days. Well, the advantage that we had as two drivers is that we could drive nonstop and get it there within 24 hours.
Yeah, you guys are on a there's a time frame that you that original driver that was arrested needed to adhere to, and that's important that you guys stick with that,
Right.
plan to make it happen. And yeah, I'm gonna stop interrupting you, but I gotta say this, just one more thing. I was a customs agent assigned to Chicago, and I was shocked when I first got there at the loads of drugs crossing the border destined for the Chicago area, and worked with many different law enforcement officers working the border, and I always found your work fascinating. I thought what you guys did was incredible. So, I don't think I said this at all since we've been talking, but hey, I envy you, and I think you having a career of doing this, I respect you so much for all the things that you did and some of these things that you're gonna talk about here. So, I'm gonna zip it and let you talk some more.
It's okay. Thank you. Thank you. Um, so when we take control of a truck loaded with drugs, depending what it is, whatever it is, cocaine or marijuana, for the most part, it was 1,000 pounds of marijuana, 1,500 pounds of marijuana, and our job was to get it. For example, Chicago. Well, we are secure. We're taking the 18-wheeler, control of the 18-wheeler, but we also have agents following us wherever we need to go. And where we stop to fuel up, because we have to stop to fuel up. And we stopped at a regular truck stop, just like every other truck, and we learned that role of cleaning the windshield to the truck, making sure we top off all the fluids and pick up a bite to eat. And say, let's go. Uh, of course, the truck had a sleeper. So if I was driving, a partner Ray will take a nap in the sleeper, and then 4 hours later switch over. Now Ray can tell you this later on. I'm sure you'll have him as a guest that I never slept. I could not sleep in the sleeper. It was so bumpy,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
and I just couldn't sleep. So I would just stay awake in the passenger side, and we would just talk, and that made the time go by fast. So, but it was always the 18 years that we spent on the road with an 18-wheeler. We really got into the habit of working like a truck driver, a typical truck driver. And there was times, Jim, there was times that we would go and we couldn't park into a hotel to sleep. If we were ahead of time, schedule, that we couldn't do that. There was times that we needed to pull into the truck stop and we would sleep in the truck stop. And in the morning, get up and pay and shower there at the truck stop. You
Oh,
know,
you guys are living that life, like, you're law enforcement officers, but, you are truck drivers.
we were living the life of truck drivers.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was phone calls, which were pre-recorded. They were recorded phone calls with the bad guy, because the bad guy would call and say, "Where you at?" "All right, we're at so and so." We never gave the bad guys our exact location. We always gave them 8 hours before.
Ah,
If he was in Chicago and he was expecting us, we'd always tell him, "Yeah, we're 8 hours away. We have a little issue with the truck, but we got it fixed." And we never tell him that we were nearby,
sure.
because we always needed to coordinate. For example, Chicago office with their office there, their agents. "Hey, listen, we're coming in with this load. We need help. with the operation.
All right. Hey, that's a great point. So if we could just talk about that just briefly, there's so many moving parts in what you're doing here. It originates at the border. You have agents that are interviewing the truck driver. You're hoping this truck driver cooperates. You're assuming the role of the truck drivers. You're actually moving the vehicle from point A to point B simultaneously while this is going on. Like you said, if you're heading to Chicago, you've called ahead to Chicago, and the group or the office there is preparing for your arrival. They're initiating their investigation to what they can look into in their area, preparing for you and that truck and the contents of that truck to get there. So you hit the nail on the head there. There's just so many different moving parts in these types of investigations that you did, it sounds like. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. There's so much. It just doesn't happen, you know, just through conversation alone by itself. There's so much to look at.
Yeah, and you don't just drive into Chicago, pull into a parking lot and say, "Hey, I'm here," and it's over. It could take days sometimes or a week or more. Is that right?
But it's very true. And in most cases, once we get to our destination, and we will call the bad guy and tell him, "Hey, I'm here. I'm ready to turn this load to you." And we would always tell the bad guy, "Listen, I have 2 hours to unload your stuff.
Mhm.
I need your help to unload because I gotta go pick up another load over here and be on my way."
Great point.
And yet at that point, the bad guy will just easily say, "Don't worry about it. I got guys here and we'll unload within an hour."
There you go. And they're motivated to get those contents, aren't they?
Exactly. But,
Alright.
we always try to get that conversation going as far as hearing feedback from the bad guy. All right. So you got enough help. All right. So we'll know how many people we're talking about.
Yeah, you're gathering intelligence as part of that, aren't you? Yeah, that makes sense.
And since we're talking about Chicago, there was that case that we did with HSI, Homeland Security Investigation, and we transported a load. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was about 1,200 pounds, and it dealt in the city of Cicero.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Been there many
Yeah,
times.
and if you're from there, you work there, you know
I
you did
did.
Cicero.
Yes, sir.
And I remember we were in the parking lot of Walmart, which was about 20 minutes from Cicero on the drop-off location, and the bad guy says, "Don't move from there, I'm going over there right now to see you." And he came over, got on top, and said, "All right, you guys are the guard. You guys came here fast. Well, hey, you gotta make some money. We got another load, so we wanna hurry up." "All right, good. Just follow me." And so, "Well, how far are we going?" We're only going 15, no more than 20 minutes." So, but all this conversation is being recorded, Jim. You know, his voice, our voice, what we're saying, the direction, the person where we're going, and we follow up. And I can't remember the major highway off in Cicero. That mechanic shop was off a busy highway.
Okay.
It was a 2-lane, no, I want to say like a 6-lane highway back and forth, and busy, and we needed to back in the 18 wheeler. And in broad daylight, I want to say it was like 12 noon, on the move, busy. And we stopped. I remember I got off the truck because my partner Ray was driving. I got off the truck. I needed to stop traffic completely so he could back into back into the mechanic shop. So backed it in, and they closed the gates. Said, "All right, where's so and so, one I've been talking to? Hey, I'm here, man. All right. Hey, listen, I'm your driver. I've got 2 hours." And I go, "No, no, we're gonna unload real quick." "All right." And sure enough, it was less than an hour, and they were ready to go. So I unloaded, and I told the guys, "Listen, you got my number. I'm 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 in South Texas a lot. You need something, you call me and make it happen." So we're out of there. We drive out of there. They get us out of there, and we got 2 agents following us out of there, while the rest of the agents are sitting doing surveillance at the mechanic shop. They've already unloaded.
At the location, they're
Yeah.
they're doing surveillance at the location you just left. Okay.
So after an hour or 2 of doing surveillance, they're ready to move in, and arrest everybody. Already far away. And
And you're down the road.
yeah, exactly. So those type of operations happen regularly, and for the most part, I would say most cases did go smooth. But we did have some cases that didn't turn out the way we had planned, the way we wanted it to go. Uh, but we deal with it as we go along. If something doesn't seem right, uh, was Ray and I in situations where we were sweating and we were scared? I can honestly tell you, Ray can tell you, yeah, there were times that, yeah, we were scared. Yes. I was younger back then, but it was a good scare where I wouldn't lose control of what we were doing. Uh, it was just so good feeling to know that you were taking drugs off the streets. If it was 1,000 pounds or if it was 1 pound, you still taking that dope off the street.
I think you and I are like-minded in that concept is any amount of drugs you take off the street is a success, like you said, whether it's a pound or it's a tractor trailer full of them, I think drugs in our society are a major issue, and you're right, I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying.
Right. And our life on the road, 18 years. That's what we did. We get back home and wait for another case to come up. Now, keep in mind, sometimes we would drive the 18-wheeler that the girls were loaded in. Excuse me. We would drive that 18-wheeler. But our police department was also in control, which we had undercover 18-wheelers. We had 2 undercover 18-wheelers. And sometimes when we felt like, well, you know what, we won't be able to use this one, let's use ours. And if a question will come up from the bad guy, what happened? Yeah, you know what? That truck wasn't going to make it. So we needed to cash out and get another truck, like pronto. I'm sure you want your merchandise, right? Oh, no, no, no. Go ahead. Do whatever you need to do. Just get my merchandise here. So
Right.
in a lot of cases, we would just not use the tractor that was towing the trailer. We use our tractor to tow that trailer. Our tractor was equipped with a comma switch.
Okay.
That at some cases, and when I say cutoff switch, in some cases that I would tell the owner of the merchandise, "Hey, listen, my truck's not turning on. I don't know what's the matter." I would just cut up that switch and it won't turn. It won't cut. And then make up the story where the police comes in, we're impeding traffic, and then they call the guy, "Hey, come over here, help me." get him close to the trainer, and just arrest him at that point. In some situations where it was not feasible for us to continue with the delivery.
Okay.
A lot of the bad guys, Jim, they follow you. They'll follow you to make sure that that truck is going where it needs to go.
Right, that again, that's a great point. Um, they have people spotters or people that conduct their own surveillance crossing the border into the US to the destination area, away from the destination area. So this entire, I'd like to emphasize this point that what you're doing is very dangerous from start to finish because there's a lot of unknown variables involved here, where something, could go wrong. So, it's a dangerous I don't have to tell you, it's a dangerous role to play the undercover transporting large quantities like that.
Right, right. And yes, yes, it is. And um, but the way we look at it, and you would know this too, and let's finish this job. There's somebody's expecting this merchandise up north. Those are bad guys up there that's feeding the community with its drugs. So let's just follow it. Let's do our job. So it was for us. It was exciting to make sure that we were able to arrest people on the other side.
Yeah, it's exciting doing that, but it's rewarding knowing what you're doing. Like you said, taking that poison off the street so it doesn't get to the high school and get into the hands of those young people or doesn't get to the addict, that
That's
has major life issues because of the drug dependency. Let me let me ask you this. During your career, while you were doing this, were you assigned to, say, a task force, like a DEA task force, a customs task force, or did you work, kind of, as it happened? If a load came across and DEA had a record on the driver, then DEA worked that case, or if customs or HSI had a record on that truck or that driver, you worked with them. How did it work down there in your region, of the country when those trucks crossed those borders and it was determined law enforcement was gonna move into the interior? Does that make sense?
yes, yes, and very good. Good point. Good question, sir. Um, Basically, back then, when I became the narcotic investigator, I was assigned to initially to Drug Enforcement Administration in McAllen, Texas. Spent 13 years there, and and then I spent another 5 years with HSI, McAllen, Texas, and that's where Tony Farias was my supervisor at HSI for the 5 years, and I cannot stop talking about Tony because he was the type of supervisor that he would say, "Hey, Ray, we got this case. Um, it needs to go to Atlanta, and I already told him that we can do it. Are we ready? Yeah, we're ready. We, for the some
Yeah.
cases, a case needed to be approved through us. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, we can do it. No, we can't do it. But Tony was that supervisor. So, yes, we're going to do it. Let's go. We got the driver. And it could be that Ray and I were assigned to task force. So we worked under the government, the drug enforcement, and HSI. And it was always if HSI needed a driver, and you know what, can you do that driving? And said, well, I can do it, but I take my partner with me, both of us. So we worked together. It's safe. It was a lot safer.
Yeah. And I'm sure I'm confident there were so many quality officers and agents and detectives and investigators with so many different departments and agencies, but I wanna highlight Tony, that you mentioned there, originally with Customs and then with HSI. That guy was a fantastic employee, a great agent, and from all accounts that I've heard, a great supervisor. And it's guys like Tony and it's guys like you that make me feel good about this country and law enforcement being out there doing the things that you guys did to help keep society safe. So I just felt it's important to mention that about Tony. And the same goes for you as well, for all these things that you did throughout your career. This episode of the Right to Remain Silent True Crime Podcast is sponsored by Graphic Options. When it comes to custom screen printing, embroidery, and promotional gear, Brenda and her team are the real deal. I trust them with everything, whether it's a hat for my consulting business, a shirt for my podcast, or a large order of both. They've never let me down. They don't treat you like just another order. They listen, they care, and they make sure you walk away with something you're proud to put your name on. You have the right to great service and quality, and that's exactly what you'll get at Graphic Options. Visit graphicoptionsonline.com. That's graphicoptionsonline.com, and let them know the Right to Remain Silent podcast sent you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And you're right. Tony was that person that you could always depend on as a supervisor.
Yeah.
And never had a complaint about Tony. The way his work ethic was.
Yeah.
It's just excellent.
And let me ask you that. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
At this point, we're all retired and we still keep in contact.
That speaks volumes about what you think of an individual. If you keep in touch with them after retirement, that says a lot. So yeah,
Right.
same here. I keep in touch with that guy. Great guy.
Right.
Can't say enough positive things about him. Let me ask you this. We've talked about in your undercover investigations, these truckloads originating at the border, crossing the border, and they might be destined for Chicago, or you mentioned Atlanta. I'm sure listeners would be interested in, were you traveling all throughout the country wherever, these drugs were destined, you were taking them there. So I'm assuming you're going all over the country. Is that right?
It was everywhere. Um, it was Houston, Dallas, Austin, Atlanta, New York, Chicago, of course, Carolinas. It was
Yeah.
wherever the bad guy wanted his merchandise, his loadout. That's where we were going. There was no place that Tony, the supervisor, would say, "No, we can't go that way. No, we're not going." He said, "If we had a load of drugs, we were taking it and following it so we could get the bad guys on the other side."
All right. That makes sense. How about this question? And I'm sure it doesn't apply with truckloads that we're talking about crossing the border here. But in your investigations and your experience as an undercover, did that ever take you to international destinations? Did you ever travel outside of the United States in furtherance of undercover investigations?
No, sir, that we never weren't allowed. We weren't allowed to travel international. It's just that was off limits.
Yeah, that's a whole nother ball game right there.
Right, right.
Okay.
We can't control what happens internationally. Travel. We always want to be in control. We can control what happens in the U.S. Is it we can control what happens internationally.
Right. Right. Is there any one or two particular cases, as you reflect back on, today talking about this stuff that kinda stand out as, for various reasons, as, ultimately ending in a great success or some sort of incident that occurred during the undercover investigation? Is there anything along those lines that you'd like to kick around or discuss?
There's quite a few, Jim, that I like to touch base on.
Yeah, let's do it.
That cases that didn't go as planned, because in doing an undercover operation, when you're meeting with a bad guy, when you're talking to a bad guy one to one, whether it's out in the street or not, if he wants to meet you, hey, you're gonna meet me at this location. Okay, let's go. What's up? What's going on? You don't know what's going through his mind, why he wants to meet. You know,
You don't know who's there. You don't know who else he has. You don't know what their intentions are. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, there was a case uh, during the drug enforcement days that one of the bad guys that I had met for breakfast, and he only had 1,000 pounds that needed to be delivered to Houston, Texas. And I had told him it's not worth what you're paying me to take it to Houston. I need more money, 1,000 pounds, and I don't remember exactly. I think he was paying like 50 grand to take it to Houston. That wasn't. I wanted to get more money, to get more money out of him for the cases.
Yeah.
And well, let me see what I can do. So when we finished breakfast, he came around to the back of my truck. I was driving a black Dodge quad 4 door, and he drove around. And then I was being, of course, I had a mic on me, being recording our conversation, and I noticed he stopped behind my truck, didn't allow me to leave, and so I went out, said, talking, say, listen, right behind me, and he looks like he's writing down my license plates. So that was in the morning. By 6 o'clock, there was a CI. A CI is what we call confidential informant.
Okay.
And that's how whenever we talk to officers, agents, yeah, I'm gonna go meet with the CI. Well, that means confidential.
You're talking to somebody that's providing or furnishing information. Okay, that makes sense.
Well, there was a CI that said, "Hey, there's this guy that knows that there was a cop trying to transport 1,000 pounds for him, and the owner knows, yeah, he's a cop, and he wants to meet me to get information on that cop."
Mm.
So he went. The CI went and met with the guy, and the guy was assaulted, beat up, and to the extreme that almost lost his life. And just because it says, he told him, "No, I can't get you to bring, I cannot bring that officer that you say he's a police officer. You talk to him. Why don't you call him to come over here?" "No, I need you to bring him. He says he's a truck driver, but no, I was already told that he's a police officer." So somehow it blew my cover. By him running that license plate, agents were able to trace what agency ran that license. And so, in going back with that case, I'll never forget it because my kids were I had two boys, and one was 5 or 6, maybe 5, and the other one was a year old, maybe. And I remember my supervisor, it wasn't Tony, it was Michael. Michael says, this is the worst, he says, "Hermano, they know it's you, the undercover. They're going to be looking for you. Go home, switch your truck, drive something else. We'll figure it out tomorrow." This was already 9 o'clock. It was in November, back in the early 2000, early 2000, in November. And it was like about 2 days before Thanksgiving. And I called my partner Ray. Say, "Hey Ray, you know that case I did today, these mornings?" Yeah. Well, the guy somehow found out, ran the license plate through some agency and found out that, yeah, it's a registered police car. Uh, I got to change. So I'm going to take your read. He was driving a white Lincoln. White Lincoln. It's all right. Come by the house. Hmm, excuse me. We lived maybe 5, 7 minutes from each other. And I went by there, let them a truck, make sure nobody was following me, picked up his white Lincoln, and drove home. I drove home. I got home. Must have been 10 in the evening to 30. And I already had 2 days before Thanksgiving, and I had Christmas decorations in my house already, out in the yard. The kids were small, you know.
Sure.
Went inside, took a shower, climbed into bed. 5 minutes later, the neighbor called. And I said, what's up? What's going on? Hey, one of your Christmas lights on fire. So I jumped out of bed, went out to the front door, opened it. The white Lincoln was ablaze, was up in fire. The whole car was whoa. That was only 10, 15 minutes by the time I had gotten there. So,
That's hair raising.
yeah, so ran, closed the door, locked the door, ran inside, told my wife, get up, get the kids. Um, my neighbor is related to me because I'm still in the same house. And I grabbed my oldest and my wife grabbed my youngest. I said, okay, we're going to go outside and we're going to run. I've got my 5-year-old holding on my left and I'm holding my gun on my right. And said, my oldest son, being the character person that he is, I tell him there's a fire, we need to leave the house. And he say, well, if there's a fire, why aren't we rolling? Are we supposed to roll? No, the fire's outside. So I tell my wife, hold on, let me open the door, make sure it's clear. Open the door, all right, let's run. And all you see is this flame
It
shooting
was
up and
it was a big fire is what you're
yes,
saying.
and the car is just on fire. And my son goes, whoa, that's a big fire. So I run
Man,
to the neighbors and say, stay right here, stay all, knock on the door, finally answered, and let them there, came back, in around the house, checked, couldn't find nobody. Fire department was already on their way. And I'll never forget this. And I'll mention the fire chief's name because he's a friend of mine. And here we are years later. I had just mentioned to him about this case. And I said, they came there and put out the fire. And at one point, while putting out the fire, my partner Ray had a box of ammo in the truck. So you can just imagine what was going on. It started going off. Ammunition started going off. And the fire chief, uh, Mr. Simmons, came up to me. And back then, sir, I had long hair, facial hair, shoulder hair. If you look at me, you know that I was no good, not to no good. So um, Chief Simmons came up to me and said, why are you yelling at me? Why is it you have ammunition? So I don't know, sir. I don't know. I don't know. Just put out the fire. No, I'm going to report you. I don't know what kind of work you do, but I'm going to report you to the sheriff. and you're up to no good. So, sir, just go put out the fire. It's trying to catch up to my trees in the house.
Yeah.
So he did report me, you know?
You're getting victimized twice here.
Yes. So fast track, fast forward 20 years, 25 years later, I come across the fire chief. Chief, do you ever forget all the fires you go to? I admit he said, I'll never forget my fires. I remember every single fire I went to. He said, you remember you ever went to a fire on Victoria and Victoria Road and you turned off? There was a car on fire. Yeah, yeah, I remember that. And there was ammunition going off. Yeah. And then he said, why? You know that was me? That was you, buddy? That's the way he said. Yeah, and I couldn't tell you, but it was a narcotic investigation going on.
Wow.
Will I be?
He was on the right track. He had a hunch something was up.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. That was one case.
Well, let me stop you there. That I don't even know where to go from here, but I think an important point to mention hearing that story, this is the first time I've heard this. Again, hair raising is a term I'm going to use, but that highlights the potential danger of towards law enforcement, towards specifically undercover law enforcement. There is a hidden evil lurks everywhere in society. And unfortunately, law enforcement can be victims of that. And it sounds like that's a prime example of that, where you're trying to do the right thing to keep the public safe, and evil is trying to negatively affect your life. And I think a second important point to your story there is this, that you not only do you have to be concerned about the bad guys out there, but they have these resources to where they can run a license plate occasionally or run a name in a computer system or anything along those lines, run a driver's license. So there's almost an inherent danger, even today, with all of technology and the way things have changed, there's still a danger even today. So I can't even imagine having something like that happen to me. That's amazing. That's an amazing story.
And that's one of a few cases that
Would Can I ask, and maybe you can't comment on it, but did anything ever were you able to identify who did that? Was law enforcement able to pursue and identify what happened there in that scenario? I mean, common sense would say, "Hey, it was that guy that wrote the plate down and his associates," but were you able to determine that?
yes, yeah, they were able to follow up, and it was traced to a small local police department down here that Bernie, the bad guy, knew somebody there, and I'm not too sure how it ended, but I know it's a
Yeah.
small police department down here, very small. Have
Wow. Wow. That's I've never heard a story like that. That's so
and there was many cases like that, sir. Um, we always needed to cover our backs, take care of ourselves with the bad guys, and in some cases, the good guys.
yeah.
I could tell you another case that, and I don't like to brag, Jim. You'll never find me in the situation where I brag about myself.
Oh, that's I mean, that's evident. Just you seem like an even-keeled, modest person.
You know what I did, everything I've done. Um, but I feel that I played the role. Ray and I played the role of undercover, really good that I was meeting this bad guy who was well known and far. And one lunch meeting with this guy, there was a police officer in the same restaurant and knew the bad guy. And that officer goes to our chief of police at that time, JJ Medina, who was the chief at that time. And the officer tells the chief, you gotta watch it with Roy because I just saw him eating with the bad guy. I think Roy's up to no good.
Hey, that confirms you're doing a good job as an
And,
undercover.
and the chief called me that night and said, hey, Roy, just so you know, this happened. I can just imagine what you're doing, but I just want to let you know that this guy, so I appreciate it. No problem. I told him, I'll tell you if you want to, I'll tell you the case. No, no, don't want to know. That's
Yeah,
what you got to do.
that's a great that's validation to what you're doing there for sure.
Yes, and you know what, dude, Jim, the all the chiefs that I've worked throughout my career have been extremely supportive. And starting with when I started narcotics in 1992, Chief Leo Saldana and JJ Medina uh, never questioned, never questioned the operation, never questioned me that one would know, hey, what is it you're working on? What are you doing? Never. They said, our job is that we don't want to know. We just want to make sure you're safe. I said, yes, sir. Maybe, and that's it.
That is so helpful to a drug investigator, to an undercover investigator, to have that support of your management or supervision,
Right.
to help you be effective. Oftentimes, I've seen just in my career, there's almost like a jealousy sometimes out there between agents and supervisors, and that interferes with the dynamic of a successful investigation, and can be very negative. But just hearing what you said, having supportive management and supervision, that can make all the difference. You know, you can be a great agent, officer, and if you don't have that support, maybe you're not as effective as you could have been.
Exactly, exactly. And there was so much that was going on as far as being that our proximity to the border. There was so much drugs and there was money to be seized. And Chief Leo Saldana, JJ Medina, and the last chief that we worked with, Ruben Viescas, all three of those were just always there to support. Always said the question was asked, what is it you need? Is there anything I can do to help?
That's what you
That
need.
supportive.
I'm curious in your experience down along the border region through there, was there any during your time frame in your career, was there any one particular drug cartel that had a hold or was the most, influential in the drug trade down there, or was it just kind of a constant influx from all drug cartels coming out of Mexico?
It's gotta be. There's not just one um, cartel. Yeah, there's several, and you can't pinpoint the cartels. Yes, you have your drug cartel, Cartel del Monte. Uh, you have, but there's so many you can't pinpoint. Look, this is coming from this cartel
That makes sense, yeah.
because they switch, they cross over themselves. They're not trustworthy. Cartel del Norte, Cartel del Golfo, Cartel from the Gulf, which claim to be the strongest, the Gulf Cartel. So there's just so many out there. And if you really look at it, it's hard to pinpoint, look, this one belongs to this cartel unless it's written somewhere, or somebody says, "Look, I'm part of this cartel. And this is what we
Okay.
into."
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me ask you this. What you've talked a couple instances about quantities of drugs, and I think we were primarily talking about marijuana crossing the border. But in your experience and in your cases, I'm just guessing, but I'm going to ask. You dealt with all kinds of drugs coming in to the country across that border. It wasn't just marijuana. You're dealing with everything down there. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, yes. During my time, it was marijuana, cocaine, and heroin. And I know fentanyl came in later. Uh,
Yeah.
we didn't see too much of that at all.
Okay.
It
Did
was heroin, cocaine, and then of course the meth. The meth was out there.
yeah. Were you involved in you would get the drugs to their destinations, but I know oftentimes, I know US Customs and now HSI, does this a lot now, transporting of the drug proceeds, transportation of those or depositing them in various accounts, and not getting into the weeds and, specifics about that, but in your experience, were you involved in uh, the transportation of drug proceeds as well?
Yes.
The drugs are coming north from the border, there's gonna be money,
There
so
has to be money. There has to
right,
be money. Uh, we've had a lot of cases where we transported the load and we needed to wait. We needed to wait for a day or two until the bad guys call, say, "I got your money." You know, and a lot of times, Jim, w- we were in control as far as the driver of the load. And in most cases, the bad guys will provide half of the money up front for the driver. And then when you get to the destination and deliver their goods, then they will give you the other half, right?
yeah,
Uh, but there was cases that we as drivers, if we felt like, hey, this is kind of doesn't sound right, sound like they want to rip off. And when I say rip off, the way what we mean is that they don't have money, but they want to rip off the dope. They want the dope.
sure.
They don't have the money.
They're gonna set you up and take that load
Exactly.
without providing the funds for it. Okay, that makes sense.
So, and in a lot of cases, we wanted the money up front, half of them, and then the other half when we get there. There was a case we did. We dropped off 800 pounds in New York, and the bad guys, it was Puerto Ricans. In the Kibala case, the bad guys, they said, "You're gonna wait till next week to get you your money."
That's a long time.
Well, I ain't waiting till next week. I've got the deal here. I'm not gonna let it go. I'm not gonna let go of your stuff until I get the money. And we waited. We just waited one extra day, and they realized that I wasn't gonna drop off the trade. They're
And that's legitimate how drug dealers work. They're not just gonna hand stuff over.
exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Go back to that term that say, "Show me the money."
Right.
So,
You're exactly right.
so finally, at midnight the following day, I mean, we were waiting, and we had the dope ready to go and to unload. He said, "Hey, you unload it, but I want to see the money." And the guy called. Hey, listen, there's no blue car go by there. Just make sure you get You get with him, he'll cut you money. And sure enough, 12:01, 12:01 midnight, I told my partner Ray, I was in the passenger side. We were in the parking lot of it looked like an abandoned supermarket, but it wasn't abandoned. It was just closed and already out of business for the night. So I remember telling Ray, "Hey Ray, just get ready in case this is a rip off. Get ready, just come out shooting."
Right.
And this car pulls right next to the passenger side, and lowers the window about 4 inches, and he yells, "Hey, come get it!" I said, "Here we go, man." I told Ray, "Get ready. I'm getting off." And of course, we're wired. We're wired, so the agents out there can hear us talking. And I get off. I get off. Once I get off the truck, he lowers the window and throws out a box taped up and takes off. So I get
And
the box and I move, shake it around, make sure it's good. And I throw it to the back of the sleeper. Let's move. Let's get out of here. Let's let's make that drop now. Let's make that drop. Then I'm making the drop at 3 in the morning. But we were supposed to get we were supposed to get 1 million in cash. We ended up with 750,000. So that tells us, that those guys counting that money kept a lot of money.
oh, I would think so. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was the deal with the bad guys. You couldn't trust them, and they couldn't trust each other. They just rip each other up.
Yeah. Again, that example that you just shared is another that's another example of the danger involved in undercover work. You know, at midnight, a car comes, screeching up and throws a box out, wants you to walk up to it. I mean, anything could happen. Anything could happen,
Right.
especially when you're dealing with drug dealers that are oftentimes drug users with large quantities of money. Who knows what to expect? So, kudos to you for doing that for such a long time.
It was just, to be honest with you, Jim, and Ray and I had this conversation. If we were asked to do it again, and they needed a driver, which just by the way, it's come up before. We said,
Really?
"Hey, are you ready to drive? Can you drive if I call you?" He said, "Of course," because I missed that work.
Oh,
I
man,
missed that work, and I'll be ready to drive a truck if it's
that had to be adrenaline rush. It just had to be amazing.
yes. Yes, it was.
Let me ask you this, and we didn't talk about this, prior to recording, but did you make in the time frame of 2001 to 2005 or 6, did you make deliveries up to Chicago in that time frame?
Yes, I'm sure we did.
Because listening to your stories, again, I was with customs up in Chicago in that time frame, and and in the drug group, just just hearing you recount some of your stories and talking about your travels to Chicago, you and Ray, I'm thinking I might have met these guys way back then. In some of these drug cases, it's kind of coming to me here a little bit, so I just had to ask that.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're right, Jim. We probably came across each other because we're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But let me tell you about Chicago. We were there so many times that I remember going talking about Tony, and Tony would say, "Hey, let's go get a bite to eat." All right, what restaurant we going? Oh, we're going to a nice fancy restaurant. Pull over to a street corner. Give me those Chicago hot dogs.
Yes, sir.
We buy like 4, 5, 10 of those. And Tony says, "All right, let's go." We had dinner.
Yeah,
Tell you, Jim, it was the best dogs.
hands down, I agree wholeheartedly, hands down. There was a little taco or one of those little trucks right there where you would get the sausage and the hot dogs and all that. It was right on the exit onto the interstate when I would go home,
I
and
think
if I
that's
would work
I think that's what Tony took us to.
it probably is, we probably ate at the same place. I would hit that place frequently, and you would look at the place like, "I don't know if I should be eating here," but it was fantastic food. It's funny.
So
That is funny.
going back to what you said, Jim, yes, probably we did come across each other during, because I remember doing the briefing for our cases down there, and Chicago would come out with a lot of support,
Mhm.
a lot of support.
Yeah, yeah. Is there in our conversations today, is there any other case that stands out that you think is worth, that you'd like to discuss, about your undercover career?
There's there's more cases that I like to talk about, and they're really, really. I don't know if I told you this. I'm in the process of
Ah.
writing a book, and that, you know, it's gonna have a lot of those information, those cases that I came across that I worked in that book. Uh, there was cases of corruption that I
Mm,
worked, and those corruption cases were sensitive because you need to be extra careful, because there was law enforcement involved. Um, Cases that really stands out, that really uh, that a case went bad, went wrong, terribly wrong, when me being the other cover, my partner Ray wasn't around. I think he was in Atlanta at a trial, and I ended up being placed in a situation where I was assaulted. I was assaulted and banged up, but banged up by the good guys, good guys, because they did not recognize as people. Or it was late at night, 10 o'clock at night, and it was a bad night. Uh, and I still remember that like it was yesterday. And I don't. There's no fault, nobody to blame. It was just an adrenaline rush for everybody to have 1,000 pounds of weed that I took control of, and it just went bad. But I can say that we're all safe. We're all safe, and I
yeah,
touch more on that maybe next time we would talk.
sure.
I like to, because there's more corruption cases I like to
I
discuss.
I think that would be fantastic. And like we said at the beginning of our conversation today, there are so many just fascinating experiences and cases that you've worked. I would be honored if you would consider coming back and discussing additional cases to talking further about some of these cases. Is that something you would be interested in doing?
Yes, yes, sir. Most definitely, yes. I would love to come back and then talk about other cases that I have that I know I was involved with, and sensitive cases that already been, they're closed, they're over with. Uh, but uh, yeah, there were just sensitive cases
Okay.
We'll
Well,
talk about it.
yeah, absolutely. We'll plan on doing that. Well, let's kind of work towards conclusion here now. One of the questions that I really wanted to ask you was you spent a huge part of your career working undercover. What, if any, advice could you or would you provide to young officers out there that are interested in working law enfor or working in undercover? Do you have any suggestions or guidance for folks that are interested in doing that kind of work?
You know, there's a lot, and it's real simple, Jim. There's no training that's gonna get you to be the best undercover. The training can help you somewhat, but the undercover's gotta come from every case is different, and it's gotta come from you, knowing what you wanna do, what you want your objectives are, and cover your bases. You gotta remember that you're undercover, not the cop. Can't talk like a cop, can't dress like a cop. So I've always said, like I told you earlier, I don't cuss, but what I practice was I got to be the person that I'm not. That's how you take it. Be the person that you're not. So I've always been an easygoing guy, and undercover it was hard to deal with. There was one time the owner of a dope going to Houston for only 500 pounds. He was only paying me, 20 grand to take 500 pounds.
Hmm.
But going back to trusting people, trusting the bad guys, his best friend had a coke problem. And the day before we met at the truck stop, he said, "Here you go, driver." That case, that guy will call me driver. He didn't call me by my name. "Hey, driver, I got some good place stuff here for you. Here." And he took a whip out from it. "Here you go, try it." He said, "What's the matter with you? I don't do that stuff." "Why not? Are you a cop?" So I called the owner of the dope. "Hey, talk to your guy here. You want me to take your stuff up to Houston? He wants to give me coke. Now that's gonna throw me off, and I'm gonna have responsibility because your dope is not gonna make." So the main guy told me, "Guy, what's the matter with you? Don't be offering him dope here. Put that stuff away."
Oh, that's pretty
But
smart.
you just gotta be ready to answer questions. That guy you're gonna wanna ask you and test you, and you gotta be ready.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And just remember, those young investigators, be the person that you're not.
Great advice. That I think that's helpful for folks out there that might be listening that have an interest in undercover work. That can be helpful. Well, let me ask you this. Now that you're out of law enforcement, you're retired twice now from law enforcement. You have it, I believe it's your own company, Texas Strong Shield. Now
Yeah,
that's a security and investigation company, right?
correct, Jim. And I do mainly, I don't like to deal with security. I just, it's not, to me, it's not benefit. It's a benefit for me. I prefer doing private investigations. I do more private investigations, and I stay busy with that. But I'm going on 8 years of my business, and I'm fine. I'm fine the way it is. It keeps me a little busy. Huh. But my main role is I'm part of a team security group with the San Antonio Spurs. My job is to take care of the players and the staff. That's my role right now.
That that's pretty impressive. The NBA San Antonio Spurs, your security. So you're up close and personal with players and owners and staff, I would imagine.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You travel to all the games. We travel to all the games and all the home games. And one better role, Jim, is with my background in law enforcement and being around uh, people like players and staff of the NBA to take care of them, to make sure they're safe. And I take that job real serious as well.
I bet they can rest assured they are safe when you're working when you're working there with them. So that's awesome. That is awesome. If somebody in the Texas area was interested in hiring you, would they just Google the name of your company?
Yes, sir.
Texas Strong Shield.
From you, and it'll come up real
Awesome.
quick.
All right, fantastic. Well, hey, let me say thank you for taking the time to visit with me today and sharing your stories. I mean, I did some undercover work in my career, but nothing to the extent of this. So I always enjoy hearing stories from individuals like you that were at the epicenter on the border doing that type of work. So again, thank you for everything you did, and thank you so much for being a guest here today. And I really look forward to part two, to having you back again to discuss more cases.
Thank you, Jim. And I want to look forward to another meet with you. Okay, discuss.
Absolutely.
I enjoyed it. Appreciate you, Jim.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. Well, let me transition to my listeners. And as always, I just want to remind you to please like, follow, share, and subscribe my social media because that helps me bring you top quality, interesting guests like Roy Padilla and the cases and investigations that he's discussed here today. So thank you as well to my listeners and everybody. Please stay safe out there.
Thank you, Jim.
The Right to Remain Silent podcast is brought to you by Streetwise 360 Studios. I would like to again thank today's guest for sharing the story right here on the podcast. Please remember to like, follow, share, and recommend us so that I can continue to bring you high caliber guests sharing their experiences, just like we heard today. If your law enforcement agency is interested in training provided by Streetwise 360, or if you know someone that has an interesting law enforcement story to share, please contact me via the website, www.streetwise-360.com, www.streetwise-360.com.